Okay, so we are on consent agenda. Is there anything?
Horizon report number 4. None.
No.
Okay.
Consent agenda. Is there anything needs to be pulled, or is it okay?
I'll move the consent agenda.
Seconded. Okay, moved and seconded, call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. Okay, staff reports and other business information.
No, I was sorry, Chair Mac, sick business arising from the minutes. I just had something I wanted to ask about. Item 6,
Number 6.
right after consent.
Okay,
And just that, so I knew that I was gonna miss that June meeting. So when I sent forward the requests, and there were a number of them for Area B. And when I sent them forward, I sent them to the chair, copy to staff, and copy to the alternate director for Area B. Saying, for example, I support this, whatever to this group from Area B select funds. And I just wanted to make it crystal clear that I was submitting the request, supporting the request, and where the funding was to come from. And alternate Rasmussen was briefed and fully aware and went ready to support it. But there was sort of some debate about those motions going through without the Area B director being present. So I just think that I don't see what more I could have done to make it a smooth, straightforward process when I wasn't gonna be there. Is there anything else that could have been done? No?
Through the chair. No, you did have the communications with staff and approval from the chair. I think where the conversation came up is that within the procedures bylaw, there is a clause associated with directors' reports being heard by the EAD or the board in absence of the director. And that's where we required that approval of EAD to hear the director's report in your absence. And alternate director Rasmussen was able to speak to all of those fundings and reiterated that you and her had conversations around all of the funding requests that were considered that day.
So that, if there had been another director absent from that meeting, would there have been an ability to have a 2/3 majority and still proceed with the business? You could have still done it. Okay. So,
I think we
go ahead.
I think we referred the issue to the governance committee to review that section of the procedures bylaw because it's cumbersome and it creates
delay.
too many steps that don't need to be there. So I think that's something we're hoping to simplify.
So just to clarify for me, if an EAD director's alternate is at this table because they're away, then that person is the same as the director who's away, because that's the alternate that was appointed by the director, right? So with Jackie being here that day, she had your blessing, authority. She is you, in fact.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I thought. So that should mean that that person has all the voting structure that you have, or I have, or Tony, or whoever, right? Is that correct?
And through the chair, when it comes to any of the communication that we were receiving, which were the asks for grants,
Yep.
that was not an issue. It was simply director's report. And that's because what's in the procedure bylaw. And as Director Ford has mentioned, what
Yeah.
came out of that meeting was a great resolution, which was that recommendation to the board that as part of the policy development and review committee's work related to reviewing the procedures bylaw, the considerations be made to streamline processes to the greatest extent possible, including section 4.15, which is that consideration of agenda business in absence of a director. So we will be looking at streamlining that when we look at that procedures bylaw. So it isn't, as Director Ford mentioned, as cumbersome in the absence of a director, but their alternate being there.
Okay,
Yep.
so that's on the list for the policy committee now.
Yes,
And are you the keeper of that list?
yes.
Okay, then I'm completely confident we will get to it. Thank you.
Very good.
I would not remember on my own. Okay. Deputy CAO.
So now we're up to staff reports and other business. Deputy CAO, verbal update.
Thank you, Chair. Director Phillips is here to speak to a couple items and then Director Spuds. Thanks.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. So I will start off with the campfire ban. So yesterday it was announced that with the increased risk of new wildfire starts from current and forecasted weather conditions, province-wide campfire prohibition will start effective 12 p.m. noon on Friday, July 12th. These campfire bans will continue to be in effect until October or as otherwise announced by BC Wildfire Service. This campfire ban adds to the previously announced bans on larger category 2 and category 3 open fires, which came into effect in May. So nice to see them moving on this quite quickly with the change in temperatures. The second item that I have is related to the town hall. So on Monday, July 15th from 4 to 5:30 p.m., the SLRD will be hosting a virtual community recovery town hall session for the residents affected by the 2023 Downton Lake fire. The community recovery meeting is a follow-up to the previous town hall that was held on May 29th and is an opportunity to continue the discussion on various ongoing recovery issues. There will be a short presentation by Jaya Bremner, our recovery unit coordinator, and also a presentation by the Insurance Bureau of Canada. Then we will open the floor to questions. The third item I have is related to Caribou Carbon Solutions. And it's an initiative that is occurring or trying to move forwards in the Downton Lake, Gun Lake area. So the land-based recovery team, which includes representatives from the community, the SLRD and the Invasive Species Council, have been working with Caribou Carbon Solutions, which is a non-for-profit organization on an initiative that could see up to 500,000 seedlings trees replanted on private properties affected by the Downton Lake wildfire. Caribou Carbon Solutions will carry out this work at no cost to the residents. To make this project feasible, we need to have a critical mass of impacted residents who had their properties burned participate in this program. As such, to indicate our willingness to participate, there's an intake form that has been shared with the community, and we will also be posting on our website, just asking them to show there's a few requirements that are needed, such as just not agreeing not to cut down trees within 50 years. And also allowing just some access to Caribou Carbon Solutions to go see the development and any issues related to the replanting. The deadline for the intake forms is July 31st. So if there's any opportunities to promote the community putting that intake form, it'd be very much appreciated. And that's it.
One question, excuse me, I have is back to the update on the campfire bans. So I always hear these, they're gonna put a campfire ban in a week down the road or whatever, like, so if they announce on today, they're gonna put a campfire ban in, why don't they put it in tomorrow at noon? Like so they announced on the weekend that they were gonna put this campfire ban in, but it won't come into effect until, 5 or 6 days down the road. And we've got this, extremely warm weather. We've got this cold front coming in, whatever. So I don't understand why they give it such a time lag on their implementation, right? Put the fire ban in tomorrow, it's effective tomorrow, or you could say it's effective immediately, right? But it's always like so many days down the road, and in that meantime, you're liable to have an issue happen, right? I don't know why they stretch it out like that.
Through the chair, I can't speak to specifics of the timelines, but I would assume that there's potentially mobilization resources in terms of actually enforcing and other considerations that the wildfire.
Yeah, maybe
Service
put
does.
signs of- But I did hear one of the forestry, communications people say that they're very, very reluctant to put these bans in place for campfires.
Yeah.
Because everybody likes to have a campfire when they're out in the, in the backcountry. And that's fine and dandy, I totally understand that, but I also understand that the majority of these fires that happen, other than lightning strikes, are human caused. Because somebody walked away from their campfire and didn't put the damn thing out, right? So, yeah, anyways.
To the chair, we are starting to look, as was mentioned at the previous board meeting, to look at campfire bans and effectiveness and SLRD jurisdiction around that. And I think just to note that human caused campfires, there's a wide category of those. And in terms of the data of actually indicating that campfires are a prominent cause of human caused kind of wildfires, I think it actually is not a significant portion. There are other things that can lead to wildfires, such as, cigarettes, agricultural operations, commercial operations.
Down
There's a number
power
of
lines,
factors.
everything, yeah,
So it's a nice,
I know when they say human caused, that's a bit of a misnomer because it's, like a power line comes down or whatever.
You didn't mention the railway,
It's just, yeah. So anyways, thank you very much.
so there's one thing we need. Does it, some education about campfires, because some people I know genuinely think they've put out their fire. Because they don't really understand what it means to put out a fire. And when I was a kid, 8 years old, when we were being taught how to light campfires, we were also taught how to put them out and how to make sure they were out.
Yeah.
And say a lot of people don't know that. Where do they learn it? So
I'm really interested in this Caribou Carbon Solutions. With the name Caribou, it sounds like they might be coming from like Williams Lake area, or is that where they're based? Because this,
I think they're out of Kamloops. I know that.
Kamloops?
Out of Kamloops, yeah.
do they make a sort of contract with the private property owner for care of the tree after they put it in? Because what we see in Lillooet, we had a tree planting program and everyone was very enthusiastic a few years ago. I think it was before the heat dome, to be fair. And now what we have is a lot of standing dead trees that just didn't make it through that event. And then they sort of don't really belong to anyone. These will be on private property. So obviously the private property owners would have some interest in keeping those trees going. Those first couple of years are pretty tough, right? And I wonder, okay, I'd like to know more about that program.
With the chair, I'll be happy to, they're just finalizing a proposal and I think more than happy to share that.
Thanks, curiosity. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Omar. Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe you could speak about how they get their funding?
Yeah, certainly. So, so Caribou Carbon Solutions, to my understanding, it's kind of a subsidiary of Zanzibar Holdings, which is a significant tree planting company. They developed a proposal, and they've worked in Shuswap and other areas as well. And so they developed a proposal. They put it out to funders to see if there's interest. Or from that funding, et cetera, to fund these projects. So they're in the proposal kind of developing and kind of floating it around right now. So it is from private funders.
Yeah, and I think most of those private funders are doing it for their carbon credits.
Yeah, that is a big component of their work.
Yeah, the biggest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. It's excellent.
Thanks, Mark. Omar.
Just providing an update on the June board resolution regarding the concrete assessment. An email was sent out to all the property owners last Friday, requesting access. There's a form attached to the email, so we're requesting access for the contractor to go on the property. And we have a really short deadline because we'll try to bring it back to the July board meeting. And we're working with the communications team to do another push here for emails, website, social media for both the carbon solution and the concrete forms. So.
Very good. Any questions from anybody? Nope.
No, I had one individual contact me about it. And he's got a contractor gonna deal with all this debris removal. And he says that maybe don't have to fill it out. I said, please fill it out. We need to know how many properties actually need it and how many don't need it. So I'll promote it.
Very good. Thanks, you guys. Will you second it or
Yeah,
receive?
was it a motion to receive?
Yep.
Yeah, move. Yep.
Okay, seconded. All question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. Thank you. 7.2, information report, July 2024, select funds report. Colin, are you there?
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Colin.
This first report is just the monthly select fund update, so I'll open up for any questions. Actually, I will note that Director Rainbow, I did receive the information regarding the tactical flashlights, so that will be reallocated and reflected in the next report.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Sal, start with you.
Thank you for the report, Mr. Hodgkins.
Just plus 4 4.
Sorry about on allocations committed for Area A, the February EAD Goldberg's Community Club flooring project. That was up to funding, and the leftover was gonna go back into my select funds, various select funds.
Yeah, there's the remainder amount of the 3,300 sitting in the 2024 allocations committed. So I still have that amount showing in case there was more expenditures coming in. But if that project is completed, I can return it to the select funds.
It's complete.
Okay, perfect. I will add that back to the Area A select funds.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Again,
I was curious, just starting with the general select, was thinking about that balance of $5,700 odd. Is there something we should be thinking about doing with that money? Does the EAD committee maybe think about that? Just a couple things come to mind. But also, what was my other question? Is there any uptake on the electric fence cost share? We had any, no one's applying for that? Okay.
I haven't heard anything.
no, I guess just my comment on that $5,000. I wouldn't want to spend all of that. Just because if something comes up and then all of a sudden we don't have anything,
That's very true.
$5,000 isn't very much money. So
True.
we could go through that in a heartbeat, right? So maybe just having that little bit of a balance there is a cushion against something that may came up.
I hear you. And we're only in month 7 of the year.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. Tony, you okay with that?
Yep.
Okay. All right, move to receive. Move to second. Thanks, Colin.
Is the Highline,
Thank you all.
do we have any progress on that?
It's being built.
Being built.
It's being built.
Thank you. Do we have enough money in that?
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
sure we do.
okay. That's my only question. Thank you.
Apparently those burned out cars were removed.
They were. I just confirmed that. Unfortunately, orange hawkweed is thriving in that same.
Well, I talked to that highways guy again last week and they moved one of them.
They're both gone.
Yeah, they're both gone now, but they moved one of them and he said he wouldn't get to the other one till the middle of July. And I said, like, why don't you do it right now? Get it over with. Obviously you did, so that's good. But anyways,
They should definitely get on that orange hawkweed.
yes, moved and seconded. Call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. Thank you very much. 7.3.
Yes, good.
Request for decision. Canada Community Building Fund, previously Gas Tax Fund, Community Works Fund, CWF project funding request. That it be recommended to the regional board that up to $30,394.04. It's pretty interesting. Be allocated from electoral area C Community Works Funds to the Gates Lake Park Service, CC 2106E, towards the purchase and installation of a second public toilet. So I'll move that.
We have to do that separately, do
I'll
we?
second that.
Yeah, we
Let's
do them
do
all separately, or? Yes,
You don't have to, but because they're coming from, some are coming from different
Yeah, I think we
areas,
should
it might be a good
consider
idea
it. Yeah,
to
okay.
consider them.
Okay.
so I'll move that, seconded.
Yep.
Okay, moved and seconded, call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried, thank you for that. And then, that up to $100,000 be granted from electoral area C Community Works Funds to Pemberton Meadows Fire Association towards the construction of a new fire hall, subject to Pemberton Meadows Fire Association entering into a Community Works Funds agreement with the SLRD on terms satisfactory to the SLRD, and the Director of Finance be authorized to sign such Community Works Funds agreement and other related documents. I'll move that.
Second,
Seconded. Okay, moved and seconded. Call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. And that up to $10,000 be granted from electoral area C Community Works Funds to Lillooet Nation towards the redevelopment of the teacher's residence at the Coast Mountain Outdoor School property, subject to the Lillooet Nation entering into a Community Works Funds agreement with the SLRD on terms satisfactory to the SLRD. And I will move that.
second,
Seconded.
Question. Just a clarification.
Yeah.
That the Coast Mountain Outdoor School, is that where we had that
Yeah,
meeting
that's where
that
we
day?
were at.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Okay, moved and seconded, call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. And now,
You got,
oh, I
Area
didn't read
B.
all of it. Okay,
haven't you got
and the Director of Finance be authorized to sign such Community Works agreement and other related documents. Okay, next is that up to $52,122 be granted from electoral area B Community Works Funds to Lillooet Learning Community Society towards the purchase and installation of heat pump systems at the Hub building, subject to the Lillooet Learning Community Society entering into a Community Works Funds agreement with the SLRD on terms satisfactory to the SLRD. And the Director of Finance be authorized to sign such Community Works Funds agreement and other related documents.
and I'd like to move that.
I'll second it.
Okay, moved and seconded. Call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried.
And just so Colin Hodgkins knows that we did have the Lillooet Learns annual general meeting last week, and that, first of all, it was a really positive meeting. And that, as they have been saying, the agreement for the building purchase is almost there. So I hope very soon. And thank you for all your support and work in the background on that. So it's just great.
Great. I will, if I hear anything on the building purchase, I will let you know as well.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Is that the last one?
Yeah,
So may I ask, there was discussion many months ago about setting some money aside for the Seton Fire Hall. Have you, I think Mark Phillips was gonna do some footwork on that, but is there any activity around that you're aware of?
I haven't heard much since the original conversations.
I'm
There is
aware.
still the funding earmarked in the Area B select funds,
Is it earmarked?
but I can, well, we know it's there.
Yes,
I know that there is
fine.
that potential project.
I mean, and of course, we have other ideas, but they're not developed well enough to put them on your desk. I read all the information about, we're signing off in August here, 2024, for the upcoming agreement, and there's a couple of new categories. And one of them is doing some planning and some feasibility studies, and that's gonna be an allowable charge now to the Community Works Fund. do we have to wait until 2025 and until that agreement is signed off before we look at trying to access some funds through that? I mean, logically, we probably, right? Have to wait for that agreement to be signed and 2025 to roll around before we can apply for that purpose?
I believe we would need to wait for it to be signed, but I don't know if we would have to wait until 2025. We are going to bring an information or a report soon to the next board meeting or COW meeting with some information on the new agreement and the new categories to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Okay, and the July board meeting is probably too soon to ask about that, isn't it? Well, just have a couple of ideas, of course, but we could just talk about those offline and then you'd be aware of them at least to bring forward. Do you feel
Sure,
like
absolutely.
any pressure to allocate the outstanding funds in, for example, a community area B, Community Works Fund? Is there any pressure to allocate that before?
The new agreement stipulates that there's a 5-year timeline to spend any remaining funds from the previous agreement.
Thank you.
So, that's piqued my interest here now. So is there a new agreement then in the works?
Yep.
Yeah.
It was announced last week.
Oh.
Yeah.
So that's wonderful. So, and is it? You can give me the update on it.
I'm not the expert because I'm on leave from the board, so I don't know.
Okay, so Colin, does it mirror the previous gas tax fund allotments or?
It's very similar.
What's it gonna be called?
It's very similar. It's the same gas tax. It's just another 10-year extension, and they've changed some of the categories. And I think it's mostly adding categories rather than subtracting. So there aren't a lot of changes. We were hoping to have something to bring to this meeting, but it was pretty tight turnaround to really dive into as we just received it a week or two ago. So we will have some more information in an official report soon, but there are not any major significant changes to the program.
Okay, well, that's wonderful news. I guess I missed that somewhere, but just so you say they've added some new categories and they didn't eliminate any?
I'll have to confirm that, but generally there's nothing major that was removed. So I do know that like fire truck
If they have added
purchases.
new categories, that's wonderful because it was so restrictive before. There was so many things you could have spent money on that you couldn't, so this will be wonderful.
What I recall from reading it is that all the existing categories would continue.
Yeah.
And one of the new things that caught my eye was that the purchase of a fire truck would be allowable. And
Correct.
also, and then the one that I was interested for B was feasibility studies and detailed planning. That could be really helpful for me in a couple of areas, so those are the only ones I remembered as being extra.
Well, the allowance to be able to put money towards a fire truck, that is new and that's wonderful.
That's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely, critical. They allow you to build a fire hall, but they don't allow you to buy a truck to put in the fire hall. So now that's wonderful. Yeah, it's very good.
If you look at the development of that fund over the years, like originally,
There was nothing.
you couldn't spend it.
No, I think it was
Not in a
one
region-
line item.
Not a regional district anyway,
Yeah.
it needed to be in a municipality, but now it's a lot better than.
Oh,
I
yeah,
see, and
absolutely.
this latest version is better yet.
Even better, yeah. So,
Yeah, Colin, have you seen how much funds that the SLRD will be receiving? You know?
Yes, there is a schedule. It's, I believe, 2025 is just a slight increase, or 2024 was a slight increase over 2023 as well. But I'll bring the official numbers back to another meeting. But it isn't a huge change.
Yeah, I did see a table online from on the government website. It was around 311,000 for the SLRD.
It's more than that.
More than that.
That's what I saw.
I
on
think
the
it's
table.
slightly higher. I can check.
I think area D gets that much.
Yeah, this just came out on July 3rd, so.
Yeah,
Am I forgetting any new categories there?
It says, fire truck purchases and planning initiatives that support housing. Resilience projects, fire truck purchases and planning initiatives, so.
Okay.
It's not, that's not an exhaustive list. I think that it says here they'll be contacting local governments in the coming weeks with more information, so.
Well, however it works out, it's all good news.
Totally.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's wonderful.
Especially as we've just bought a fire truck.
But, yeah, you're not gonna buy a new fire truck, that's for sure, on at one time, but, definitely used fire trucks. Yeah, for smaller communities, right?
Oh, we've got one for sale.
Well, there you
Who
go.
wants to buy a truck?
Okay, that's, yeah, excellent, so I guess,
It's right in here, we're required to spend within 5 years of entering. Sorry, I'm asking you questions that are in your report already.
okay, well, that's all good then.
Yeah.
So, now we're up to 7.4.
Receive?
What did we just do?
You made each motion already, so you're moving on.
We've done all the motions.
Okay.
Pardon me?
So they're all-
You're at 7.4.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, information report, follow-up on director's report, support for BC Hydro Trust for Area A, Director Demare.
Yeah. So I'm looking for funding. Support for funding for staff to help with the Area A BC Hydro Trust. At the board meeting, there was a resolution that was passed whereby Area A can research the feasibility and process to create BC Hydro Trust. And this resolution is for select funds that SLRD staff investigate the process and feasibility of creating BC Hydro Trust for Area A in conjunction with the provincial government. That consideration of funding of up to 5,000 from Area A select funds be allocated to general government to commence preliminary work, including but not limited to securing urban system documents related to the Bridge River and Lillooet BC Hydro Trust project be deferred to the EAD committee.
Any questions?
Well, I'm not quite clear about it, okay? Maybe I'll defer to Angela. Yes, go ahead.
Through the chair, for clarity, on June 27th, the board did pass the resolution that SLRD staff start to investigate the process associated with the feasibility. And they deferred the allocation of select funds back to EAD because that's under the delegated authority of EAD.
Yes.
So what we're looking for today is a consideration from EAD for that allocation of $5,000, as Director Demare had
Yeah,
mentioned.
so that first step we can ignore,
Yep.
because it's already been done.
Yes.
Okay, so. And I don't understand the transfer from one cost center to another, but we're just approving the money.
It's just where the money is coming from. The board already approved the whole.
I know where the money is, we have to prove, because I remember saying that that's an EAD decision, but I don't understand why it has to be transferred from one account to another.
Angela?
Through the chair, for financial purposes, because it is going to be an undertaking of SLRD staff time. So we do need to move the funds of $5,000, which is the wish of the area director, from the select funds into general government, where we can then allocate it to the hours that staff put in to
Perfect.
work on that project.
Thank you very much. Are you moving that?
Moved, seconded.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, call a question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. Very good, 7.5. Welcome, chief.
Good morning, folks. Thank you, Chair.
Before you get started, I just want to say this is an amazing piece of work, so good for you.
Thank you. Much appreciated. It was a year and a half in the making.
Yeah.
Through the chair, I'm gonna follow along on my presentation on my laptop. And thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. And we will begin with the next slide. So the purpose of the presentation today is to report on the findings of the Fire Services Review Project and to share the recommendations. This presentation in its current form will be repeated to the board on July 24th. So the agenda today, I'm going to speak to the review process, fire services in a regional district specific context, setups of administration and service types, the operational review itself. I'll touch on a couple of risk areas in the SLRD and then speak to findings and recommendations for next steps. So a few of the key reasons why the Fire Services Review was conducted. Rapid economic growth in Area D is about to commence. An evolving regulatory and legislative environment in the province of BC. And some residual concerns regarding fire services operational and policy matters. So the goals of the review, first and foremost, is maximizing the safety of volunteers on the front line. Also is ensuring cost-effective and efficient service delivery. Helping each service area begin to meet the expectations of provincial regulatory standards. To manage known risks in firefighting. To ensure the SLRD legislative and supporting policy structures reflect the operational realities on the front line. And to find further opportunities to collaborate in service delivery. So the review process was really a 5-step process. It started with evaluating the provincial legislative and regulatory environment. I did conduct an analysis of fire services reforms in other regional districts. Conducted an examination of the existing setup in the SLRD. And then I conducted an operational review specifically of the SLRD taxation-based services. And then there is a report that accompanies this presentation. And in this presentation, we discuss recommendations for consideration by the board. And I just want to call out real quick is what was in scope for this review were services that would not be currently identified as compliant to known regulatory standards. And or those that are fully managed by the SLRD to ensure that they are prepared to meet the recent revisions to provincial regulatory standard, which I'll touch on what that means later in the presentation. So setting the stage, fire services in a regional district specific context does have some challenges. There's been a lack of provincial oversight historically. And so fire services have remained static in form and function for decades. Historical expectations were unrealistic for the rural fire services environment, and they were historically based on municipal fire departments. It's important to note that most of the fire service in the province is volunteer-based. In a rural environment, firefighting can be more dangerous. Fire department will arrive to structure fire later. In the fire, so the home will typically be more involved. And unincorporated rural areas have smaller populations and a lower tax base. And so this did change a decade ago. In 2014, the Office of the Fire Commissioner was mandated to implement what's known as the minimum training standard, which was specifically targeting the volunteer fire sector. And so moving on to how fire services typically starts with community consultation, an area assessment, the establishment of a legal framework, assembly of a group of people willing to train and respond to emergencies. That's our volunteers on the front line. A budget to then help to facilitate the acquisition of equipment, apparatus, and facilities, and then training qualifications which to work by to facilitate service delivery. And this is really the essence of what defines a fire department, or the creation of a fire department. And a fire department will have an associated chief that manages its operation. And in terms of service setup, it starts with, in terms of the legal framework, some bylaws. There'll be a service establishment and or operational criteria bylaws created. And in some situations, a service agreement will accompany fire department operations. And so the bylaws provide a mechanism to delegate authority for the fire department to act. And the operational bylaws intended to reflect the operational reality or intended reality. And then what's created in the establishment bylaw is a fire protection area. So it serves as an area of jurisdiction for delegated authority for the fire department. And it helps compartmentalize cost and effort inside of a manageable area, and normally excludes provincially managed land. And so there are a couple management models in regional district fire services. There's local government managed, and then there's independently managed. There are, in a modern context, far more benefits to a local government managed model. And I expand on that in my report that accompanies this presentation. A couple of key call outs is the local government that's facilitating service delivery can actually omit components of the OFC standard from the recent revision. And it can help a department that's in good standing while working towards regulatory compliance get access to additional support such as grant funding. And lastly, on this slide, it's important to note that no fire department can forego the requirements of the provincial regulatory standards in a post-2014 modern context. In regards to service administration, so the Office of the Fire Commissioner, their minimum training standard introduced a term known as the AHJ, or the authority having jurisdiction. And this was great because it really helped delineate administration and service delivery from operations. And it attempts to create a partnership structure between the local governing authority and the service operator. And it does well to guide local government on fire services administration best practice. So some key things that the AHJ does, it does have the discretion to determine the means and to what degree services are delivered. AHJ is responsible for a variety of things. A couple of the keys are determining and defining and declaring the intended service outcomes, is accountable for the collection and the spend of the taxation funding that's collected. And it does then delegate the authority to the fire chief to operate, such as operating on private land. It can delegate itself work of the OFC standard, so this is a new revision. And it acts as a critical support function in the modern context. So moving on to the types of services. Structure firefighting. So this really serves as the foundation for fire protection service, is the ability to fight fire that may reside on human-built structures. And the entry-level training, the competency standard for entry-level structure firefighting is known as exterior operations, and we expand on that in a subsequent slide. So what you learn in structure firefighting? See, on this slide, you can see sort of some of the foundational skills competencies that you will learn, but also included in the curriculum is how to appropriately act as a public-facing, authority-based emergency service organization. And some of the benefits a structure fire department can provide as a service operator. Essentially, the primary mandate is keeping a community safe from fire. And slide 15, please. And here you can see some of the key benefits that is provided to a community or that a structure fire department has access to. And so on slide 16 now is another type of service. So in a modern context, fire prevention is becoming more of a distinct and discrete service type and there's more emphasis on fire prevention, which is great. And on slide 17, fire prevention. It's simple to implement, it's cost effective, and one of the great things is it's a facilitator to community engagement, and it fits really well into the rural fire services mandate. And so the last fire service type that I touch on in this presentation is wildland firefighting. And wildland firefighting is typically it's the first service that would be added onto a fire department's mandate as an extracurricular service that it'll provide, and this is really important in the rural fire services. But on page 19 there's some distinct disadvantages to delivering wildland firefighting as a standalone service offering as articulated on this slide. Fortunately, the province of BC has stepped up and created a pilot program known as the CCWR program. And this is to help self-assembled community groups or groups of convergent volunteers get involved during instances of wildfire and be under the leadership of the BC Wildfire Service. And so now moving on to touch on fire services regulation in BC and get a little more prescriptive with what that looks like is, so the Office of the Fire Commissioner's minimum training standard as referenced was introduced in 2014, revised recently. It is compulsory for all fire departments to meet the minimum training standards or work towards them. And I expand on what that means. And really what's great about the minimum training standard is it's an aggregation of all the overall arching regulatory and legislative requirements of both local government and service operators in one single constitution. And so what does regulation accomplish? It addresses known risk in firefighting. It makes roles, responsibilities, and expectations clear in service delivery. It covers practical and ethical considerations when acting as authority-based public-facing agency. It enhances consistency and interoperability with other emergency services agencies. And ultimately, it preserves firefighter and community safety. And so on this slide is a graphic on the competency ladder. Encircled in red is the exterior operations level most relevant to the volunteer fire service sector. And so adopting the OFC standard. So transitioning to a compliant fire services or fire service rather, as there's a few key things here on this slide I want to call out, which is more of an obligation of the AHJ. Services need to be formally declared and training records need to be individualized for every firefighter. And operational guidelines need to match the specific activities that may be conducted on the fire ground. And so transitioning to a compliant fire service, what does it start with? It starts with records evaluations for equivalencies, skills assessments, having training curriculum implemented along with a schedule, a training officer assigned to the department, and just ensuring that they have the right equipment for the job. The OFC does provide complete and comprehensive training packages for each service level that includes PowerPoints. And so working towards compliance status. So there's a term I coin as trending to compliance. And so this is an acceptable state to reside in in the volunteer rural firefighting world. And it's important to note that not all firefighters require the same training. It's okay to be a support personnel. And existing SLRD departments, they've been in operation for quite some time, so we're already on an accelerated path. And the fire department doesn't need to do structure only. It starts with structure competency, but then it expands to wildland and in a lot of cases medical and or technical rescue. And departments can leverage the train the trainer concept, and this comes out of the OFC standard in which they can be self-sufficient in their training. And so provincial standards in remote communities, it's important to note the legal system makes no distinction between municipal and rural firefighters. As mentioned before, rural firefighting, it's still a dangerous environment, and effective fire suppression on structures prevents wildfire. And so moving on to the fire underwriter survey. Canadian insurers use the Fire Underwriter Survey dwelling protection grade system in calculating homeowners insurance premiums. And the price of insurance in a community with a good dwelling protection grade is substantially lower than a community with a poor one. And this is often the impetus and rationale behind the collection and or increasing of taxes in a local fire protection area to be able to expand the service offering to reach a dwelling protection grade score. And some of the key benefits is it makes your homes insurable from fire and not ultra expensive, ideally. And ultimately, it puts money back in the taxpayer's pocket. Slide 28, please. And now slide 29. And so on, this is a quick graphic, and it's a generalized indication of the savings that can be obtained from transitioning a fire service or a community that would be considered unprotected to one that's considered semi-protected, as the cost of homeowners fire insurance is more than half. And there are relaxations provided by the Fire Underwriter Survey in the rural environment, in which rural fire services, they can leverage alternative water supplies and evidence of reliability indicators for their apparatus. So moving on to the operational review. So the approach I borrowed from an established format from the Office of the Fire Commissioner, and it's one that they recommend departments conduct annually. And it's great to create an operational baseline for where a department might reside, and it informs the areas requiring investment and how much support may or may not be required. So findings in the SLRD, a variety of service models exist across the region. 2 of 6 would currently be considered fully compliant. 2 of those are fully managed by the SLRD. And then the remainders are independently managed organizations at this time. And so findings in the SLRD, passionate volunteerism witnessed throughout the SLRD, strong leadership and diverse skills competencies are already established. However, service mandates and capabilities remain unclear within the independently managed model. And so 2 the primary risk areas in the SLRD, the Howe Sound East Expansion Project, and I do go into more detail in my report that accompanies this presentation, but essentially it just has to do with scaling the service there in lockstep with the economic growth. The next priority is the independently managed fire services. So currently they're operating without operational criteria or service levels established, operating without service agreements in some situations. The preferred service ownership model will need to be determined within the context of everything that's being discussed. And I would suggest the allocation of staff time and budget to facilitate change management and OFC implementation plans going forward. So in summary, the SLRD should focus on Defining the minimum training and proficiency standards that apply to firefighters and officer positions. Establish a process for collecting information on how each department is to meet regulatory obligation or expectation. Identify areas where the SLRD can assist departments in meeting their service mandate. Establish a process for any deficiencies or concerns which may be identified or raised. And clarify relationships, functions, and roles of all stakeholders in fire services delivery. And lastly, ensure that any service agreements that are implemented stipulate explicit operational criteria when operating independently. And so nearing a close here with the regional recommendations. Develop an implementation plan and associated budget for adoption of the OC minimum training standard for each fire protection service. Specify the role of the SLRD and myself in the fulfillment of the AHJ function for all service deliveries. Obtain financial support to work with professional contractors to help with engagement strategies, feasibility studies, and service policy updates. Create governance policies for standalone community-based wildland firefighting. And dedicate cross-divisional SLRD staff time and budget to support the above recommendations and their long-term implementation. And I do have individual department recommendations in the subsequent 2 slides. And essentially this is touching on the Howe Sound East expansion project for the Britannia Beach Fire Department. And then slide 37 touches on some key considerations for the Garibaldi Volunteer Fire Department, such as preserving their fire underwriters scoring and some incremental work items required to get them to the revised standard, and then some items to potentially expand their service offering for their community. So the intended next steps on slide 38 is to present this same report in the same format to the board on July 24th. Bring a staff report forward for a future board meeting or subsequent board meeting with the prioritization of the recommendations and an implementation plan that includes a timeline and budget implications for the board's consideration. And that concludes the presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tony, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I want to say it's a really comprehensive report. Well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Area D, I'm kind of very fortunate to have the 2 fire departments that are fully managed and so on by the SLRD. And I just wanted to comment about Britannia Beach. I remember when I first started this, 2014, coincided with when that playbook came in. I remember having conversations at budget time that year about what were the implications and so on. And over the years, I've seen how that structure that was imposed has really helped improve that department and in terms of its equipment, its training facilities, everything, and so I think this report it kind of provides a template or a plan for bringing the same kind of improvement, probably in the rural areas, not to the same extent as say in Howe Sound East, but it can only result in better service and safer service as well. I just have one question about the CCWR. Is that right? Cooperative Community Wildfire Response. And maybe it's just to say that I'd like to meet with you, you and Mark, or I'd like to talk about the Upper Squamish Valley group who they're not really included in anything yet. They exist. They are keen. They are committed. They attend fires. They have equipment. So we can't ignore them. I've supported them in the past with grants. They get some money through their Ashlew Creek Foundation. I just want to make sure that as they move forward, everything is compliant, you know, that if they're gonna ask me for money, am I able to give them money anymore? But not me, but am I able to apply for grants on their behalf? So if I could just suggest that we meet at some point, I don't think it's time to discuss that here, but if we can, that's on my agenda. House Sound, you know, the Britannia Beach and Garibaldi, I don't need to worry about them, I just stay in contact with them. There's this other group I'm really interested in working with. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Rainbow.
Oh, one other comment, sorry. Mutual aid agreements. I've had fire chiefs in the past nagging at me about mutual aid agreements, specifically for the Britannia Beach group. To my knowledge, we still don't have one with Lions Bay. They're so close to us. And there is cooperation between the two departments. And my understanding is that both of the fire chiefs want to have a mutual aid agreement. So it seems to me there's some sort of political interference happening there. So I just want to highlight that, you know, I will support it any way that I can. And if you just point me in the right direction.
Thank you, Director Rainbow. And that item, that is itemized in the recommended, the recommendations for Area D going forward is the establishment of, or the closure on the establishment of mutual aid agreements in the corridor.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thanks. Go ahead, Vivian.
Thank you. I think just as you outlined in your report, you were sort of the nature of this work didn't really apply in any great degree to what I have going on in Area B, correct? Okay.
That's correct.
Are there any plans to sort of reach out and work with, I mean, there's 4 groups there, and I don't think there's any question that Area B is kind of in the highest risk in terms of fire, but also probably the least resourced and the most sort of sparsely populated and so forth. And I love your expression trending towards compliance. That's what we have in Area B.
Certainly, yep.
I would hope that reaching out to those groups and providing them with some support and not sending a consultant that we're hiring, but actually you in person or somebody on staff here that would actually be someone that would be speaking to them in the event of an emergency could happen in the near future. Or I don't see that in the plan, but I hope that it's in the plan. There's lots to talk about in terms of what's going on, and those groups are in very different places. I'm quite proud of all of them. There is one taxation-based service, although I don't think that it's been sorted out in terms of how that money in Seton Portage and the Shalath Band and the arrangement with the Seton Valley Volunteer Group, you know, they are working together. They have sprung into action, as you know well. But I think probably they'd be the priority in terms of the 4 groups in B for your time and attention when you have time and attention for them. But also the Yalakam is really doing some brilliant fire smarting work, as well as getting themselves organized to be, you know, a responding brigade up there, and it's very remote. And as I hope, you know, I would really like you to actually see some of those places when you have time to be able to kind of appreciate some of the realities, given the way that the fires came from both directions in the last few years in terms of the Yalakam specifically, and the controlled burn that Houston has just done in the last year. There's quite a bit going on, and there's quite a bit of risk, and I think they'd really benefit from some of your expertise, and they're certainly asking me for funding, and I would like it to be, you know, with your approval and support. And yeah, is within the next year a reasonable timeline for some sort of connection with some of those groups? Because I see you have a lot of work to do right here. But it's just, yeah, I'll stop there.
If I may, through the chair, to definitely agree that the risk in area B is significant. On the emergency program side of our team, we have been, and we've gone up to Yallicum. We met with the team there. We talked through Fire Smart, talked about ways that we could support that community. And my intention is to go to all of those communities that have been selected as CCWRs, Cooperative Community Wildfire Response communities this year to make that connection. Not considering other things that may come up potentially in emergency, but my plan is to go to all those communities to make that connection. And definitely in terms of scene portage, I do have a close connection with Cliff Casper, and we are continuing to work towards establishing a long-term fire services agreement. And Rob's guidance and kind of expertise input into that is definitely very supportive.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Well, thank you for the report. It's an excellent report. And I think it hits on all the various pieces. And I've got a couple of questions. One related to the cooperative community wildfire response groups, and we've got lots of them within the SLRD. And just on the funding aspect of it, because previously, prior to this announcement this year, going back, any funding that went to these community groups had to sign a waiver on that they would not use the equipment for fighting fire. I mean, ask Kristen, because I'm sure she remembers all that. So moving forward with the CCWR, the funding, because now they're going to need equipment to do what they need to do, right? So now the funding will be related to the CCWR. Am I correct?
Through the chair, that is our understanding, as Rob outlined in the board presentation. That is something that we do need to look at in creating kind of the policies and have a closer look at that. But that is, yeah, and it's in our interest to see those groups be effective CCWRs when called upon by BC Wildfire Service.
Yeah, and the other aspect of even with that group, but particularly with the other fire services that we have, like we have now, we've got 3 of them, fire societies. On the whole aspect of you know, getting an agreement with BC Wildfire, ground land, initial attack, agreements with BC Ambulance Service and rescue. So that all that is really pertinent in all of our remote areas. And you've talked about all that in your report. And I really like that because that is where we need to get to. So that everybody's trained up to do what they need to do. So I look forward to the next steps. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think one of the keys is for sure is the community engagement aspect of it. That is the whole key to moving forward with this. Because there will be tax implications to some of them. Thank you.
my turn. No, this is an excellent report, and I think that once we start to implement some of your recommendations here, which we most certainly have to do, I think it would be very wise for you to put a recommendation forward to the board that we need to, for next year's budget process, we need to hire a deputy fire chief, because there's just way too much work here for one individual to accomplish with your House Sound East coming in, and all this other stuff, just working with all these different groups. I know you have a plan for a test pilot with a certain, fire group, and that's wonderful, because we've got to sort of figure out how this is gonna move along with the smaller areas. Pemberton Meadows wasn't involved in this, so that needs to be put into there, right? And like I say, it's just for one person to do it, you don't have any time, you're fully loaded now. So if the fire chief, absolutely needs some assistance, and I think that as we grow the regional district, if you look at other regional districts, some of these regional districts, since that playbook came in back in 2014 and then 2023, some of those regions, they've hired, up to half a dozen or more deputy fire chiefs out in the hinterland, so to speak, to make sure this stuff actually happens. Because, we've had, so back to your saying hire a contractor now. That's all fine and dandy, but we've hired contractors before, and some of the contractors you hire come from a municipal large fire department operation. They're very well intentioned and they're very intelligent individuals from the fire point of view, but they have no idea what's going on in these small, tiny departments. And I think that's why we need to have somebody that's sitting beside you. You two can talk, put your game plan together, concentrate on a department and get that project done, right? So the money that we would spend on contractors would be much better spent on hiring a deputy fire chief, who we will then have forever. And, then as this thing grows and grows. So, Tony.
Just to add to that, as you're talking about the need for the support, which I wouldn't argue with at all. We've had some conversations recently about north versus south. I really think if we go that route, the person should be based in Lillooet.
Yeah.
Because you've got all those little groups around there and they need support. So that would be a comment I would make.
Yeah, I agree with that to a certain extent, but the problem with that is if we hire a deputy fire chief from somewhere, right? Yeah, you can say, okay, you have to live within the regional district, but you have to be in close proximity to the fire chief so that they can work and align. So I don't think we should specifically say that person needs to live, in Lillooet or wherever. They just need to be aligned with the fire chief, obviously, and those two work together. The fire chief or the deputy, they make their decisions on the priorities of what department needs help, how we're going to use this as a department that we're going to try to bring up to the level we want, and then all the rest of them, the outlying ones, will bring them up to that same level. But I don't think we should put any stipulations on. They should just realize, as you certainly do, we cover the whole regional district, whether it's south, north, whatever. And this is very, indicative of that. I mean, it points all that out where we need to be focusing our attention. And like I say, I think when this comes to the board, I'll most certainly be supporting, this and all your recommendations and getting the board to buy into this and let's get on with it. Especially with the situation we have now with all the fires and here, there, and everywhere. And that's not going to change, right? And as we get more and more people moving into the, remote areas, we definitely need to have the best fire protection within reason for the people that we're serving, right? So I'll leave it at that.
I have one
Go ahead.
more, just, thanks, Director Rainbow. It would be nice though, if there were a second position, that somebody actually take, the assignment of AB Lillooet area, because it is just so very different, that you could have maybe have different focus areas, but at least there'd be backup. I agree, I'd rather have some in-house staff trained this term versus contractor that comes and goes. we have to work with our First Nations in Area B, and there are 6 reserves and various authorities and jurisdictions. It's complex. Recently I got pulled into a dispute between the reserve and an Area B resident, which was a bit of a high profile situation. It would be fantastic if you had some working relations with our First Nations fire brigades as well. And they're all in different places themselves, but you know, so few resources with such a vast area in B, any way that we can collaborate and the communication in the emergency, we have to work together up there. So to have some of those relationships as well would be really great. I try and keep them up myself as the Area B director, and you know, there's a lot of change that happens, but it's and I know they operate under First Nations Emergency Services, and it's a bit of a different structure. And they are all trending towards compliance as well. But well, we're having relationships with, especially in the event, so thank you.
I'll just add to that. So we have to work with everybody.
Yeah.
We know that. I mean, it's just, you know, if you've got, you know, everybody's got one fire truck and everybody stays separate, you still only have one fire truck. Back to these mutual aid agreements, all that stuff.
Yeah.
If you start putting your equipment together, your firefighters together in cases of emergency, obviously that's the way to go. Because, you know, you can't do it all on your own. So absolutely, it's fundamental that we all have to work together. And even with like all the First Nations folks, you know, with the Lillooet or, you know, whoever, folks in Seton, everybody has to be on the same page and you work together. So communication is huge, right? Tony?
Yeah, I just go back to where I started there. Obviously, I would defer to the professionals in terms of what they need in terms of support. So if we're talking about support, which is more kind of IT stuff, you know, then it doesn't matter where the person is. I agree. But when I look at the north, if we hire somebody who lives in Squamish, and part of their responsibility is working directly with volunteer fire groups, you know, how do you manage that? It takes too long to, you know, I went up to Seton one time. It took me, it was a full day by the time I finished, and for a 2-hour meeting or something. So, you know, if the mandate is to actually get out and meet with these people and work with them and train them and so on, if that's part of it, then I quite frankly think they should be based up in an area where there's less driving involved. Which means, I said Lillooet, well, it could maybe be
Gloria's Area B.
somewhere, yeah. So that's my.
Yeah, I would, you know what, I would leave that up to the
Yes.
decision of emergency coordinator and the fire chief. Those are the two guys that are gonna have to work with that, and you know, that'll be part of their team. So if they want their team to be here, there and everywhere, fine and dandy, let them make that decision. We shouldn't be making that decision for them.
Just offering an opinion. I've lived in rural areas, you know, we're 80 miles from
I
town,
live in
things
one.
like that. I know you do. So I'm not speaking from ignorance, and I know that it's really difficult to get service. Just in the school system, when I was there, being in a school that was 80 miles from the administrative offices, you know, they never came. Whereas the schools in town got all kinds of support. So we just keep that in mind, and I know that's not our decision. We take the recommendation of the, but if we are a regional district, we have people in very remote areas, and when we're providing service, we've got to serve those areas as well as we serve Howe Sound East. So, and I hope I'm not taking anything away from you, right? Yeah.
You know, Through the chair, I think definitely we hear the comments, we hear the comments and the support. I think there's multiple factors that we need to consider in terms of actually recruitment pieces, or you know what I mean, finding the right person for the job. But fully appreciate that this covers the entire regional district. And fully appreciate the time it takes to travel to these smaller communities, and proximity is important. But a regional fire chief, I think there is many factors to consider, and definitely do appreciate the support here. So thank you.
Any other questions? Sheriff Ford, you've been silent.
I appreciate the report and I wanted to hear what you all had to say, because you all are working with this in your areas directly, and these small fire departments are critical for the safety of our community. How you interact with them and loop them all together and create this sense of security for everyone in the region, that everybody knows what everyone else is saying and doing, is far more comforting for people in every area. So we're best served in each area by everyone else serving together. So thank you for your work.
I did see some pretty complimentary notes about the Britannia Beach volunteer fire department, and I thought, well, whoever's managing that group, maybe they'd be available to help some of our smaller groups. Just a thought that crossed my mind.
The chair, Chief Rob Nichols is amazing, and he has experience in centers, and he's the cornerstone of and obviously an officer team is well behind him, but definitely he's a wealth of knowledge, and he has supported us through this proposal as well. So.
And that suggestion too fits well into a regionalized strategy.
Yes.
Is borrowing from the more
Yes.
mature departments before us, 100%.
Thank you.
Okay. Somebody want to move receipt?
I look forward to hearing it all again at the board meeting. That's great that we got to hear it here first. Thank you.
Okay, moved and seconded. Call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. Thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for your feedback, everyone.
Now on to 8.1. Director's reports.
Let me get to page 138
138.
on my agenda.
Oh.
You're probably working on the new one.
So we have 8.1 is select funds area B for outreach event at Seton Portage, Shalaf, Director Birch Jones.
Thank you. And some really good news is Allison just confirmed with me on email that we have confirmed a date. So that means that she's talked to Shalaf Chief and Council and the Seton Chamber, which are sort of two key communicators for us and stakeholders in this whole community park, the community park at Anderson Lake. And the date is September 14th is when our next outreach is going to be. So I just wanted to mention that. Eugene's gone. This request is to commit up to $500 from Select Funds Area B for that autumn outreach event, now scheduled for September 14th for the Anderson Lake Community Park at Seton Portage, Shalaf. This is intended for our SLRD staff to purchase some local food and drink for the participants on the day. I'll make that motion.
And I'll second it. Moved and seconded, call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried.
Thank you.
8.2, update on EAD conference call, July the 3rd, Director Birch Jones.
Okay, have you got that report? Submitted it with, okay. I spent a good solid hour doing up that report. Because I saw, thank you, Director Rainbow, that you requested it be added to the agenda. And I thought that was well worth doing. And then I went outside and watered the flowers or something and came back in and Jerry Lynn Kirk had in the meantime submitted a nice summary report with minutes. Now, did any of you get that? You did. So you're on her list, but Director Rainbow and Director Mack are not. Okay. If with your permission, I will make sure that you get added, because she did ask for us to reach out to other area directors that weren't included, but I couldn't tell if you were included or not. So anyway, after some technical difficulties, it was a very great conversation. You can see sort of the topics that were raised, and because of the technical difficulties, we didn't have a UBCM rep there for very long, but that's okay, because I'm quite confident that Jerry Lynn will take it all forward, and some of that will wind up on the UBCM agenda. Maybe I should just ask if there's any questions about this report and submit it for your consideration.
I was interested in that comment about mandating rooftop sprinklers. Is that a suggestion that the province actually mandates that?
This is what this fellow is suggesting. He's a northern director. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that the rooftop sprinklers are massive aid in saving houses in the event of a fire. He wanted the province to legislate this. I don't think that's a particularly good idea, but that was what he's gonna be bringing forward. And so.
Mark's here, could we just ask him what he thinks about that?
Yeah, by all means,
Thank you.
but don't put them on the spot.
No, it's not putting that as well.
Through the chair, in terms of sprinklers on rooftops, I would be interested in doing some research on that, but I don't really know the answer to that. I would really look to the BC Wildfire Service Structure Protection to provide that expertise.
So I'll give you my 2 cents worth on that. So sprinklers are an excellent thing to have on your roof, for sure they are. But the fact of the matter is, you have to have a continuous water supply to activate them, right?
Power.
So if you get evacuated from your remote area and you have no power, your well goes down, if you're on a well, which you probably are, then you have no water, the sprinklers don't work, right? So, yeah, if you're like, in my particular situation, I have water coming off the mountain, I have water all the time. So I can put the sprinklers on, I can go away, I can come back 3 weeks later and they're still going. But the point is, a lot of the places up in Sal's area or Vivian's area, even in my area, if you're running on a well and the power goes down, you have no water. So, yeah, the circumstances will dictate whether they're good, bad, or otherwise, right? So when you get these sprinkler protection units coming in and they install all the sprinklers, they have the water system, the pumping system and all that to make sure the water's running, right? So anyways.
Through the chair, may I just add, sorry, add one thing. I'd say as a good first step is the Fire Smart program. Our LFRs are available across the SLRD to support doing home assessments and also making recommendations. I mean, there's other things that need to be taken into consideration, such as what roofing material, your siding material, brush, and so there's many steps that can be taken. But I think if there are questions in the community, contacting our local Fire Smart representatives or Lucy, our Fire Smart lead, should definitely be probably better positioned than I am to actually answer those questions as well.
Excellent advice.
Fair enough, and just to say, just from the notes, I wasn't necessarily recommending this, I was just trying to. But one thing that I did think was a very good idea, which was one of the area directors has on their regional website, who, she called it, "Who are you mad at?" Because you must have the experience all the time of being approached for concerns about, oh, let's just say MOTI off the top of my head, or health. Where, you're approached as a regional director and you really do not have a lot of authority or control or power or jurisdiction in that. But that to be able to provide the right contact person in your regional district is a pretty good service. And actually having that published on the website, I thought that was a pretty good idea. Who are our contacts? I realize that's a clerical chore to keep it up and keep it up to date, but I try and do that as in my own area. But I thought it was not a bad idea at all.
There's a
It's
regional
just
district
going-
that has a portal that you can go in and choose where the pothole is or where the water main break is, or, and then it will point you directly at the contact for the right department, so that as a citizen, you can access the information really simply. It's a very expensive
it?
portal. It's something that has to be maintained by an IT department on a regular basis. It's not as simple as just putting a
Probably
map
better
up.
just to have it scribbled down in the back of your agenda book.
Well, it would be
So it would have to
it would be
be,
a phone book.
it would
Remember
have to
phone
be
books?
updated continuously,
Yeah,
yeah.
to
So-
keep it
I
relevant,
suppose.
otherwise it would be out of date. and
Well,
whatnot.
if you're doing water main breaks, potholes, all that stuff, yeah.
But it's a
Every-
really slick website for that regional district. Might
But the final word on the sprinklers, it was interesting for me to see that in there because I was talking to someone in our community about Fire Smart and discovered that he used to be a firefighter. I didn't know that before. And he commented that he said, "Oh, I've got sprinklers on my roof and everybody should do that." That was his comment. So it was kind of interesting to see that coming from somewhere else.
I'll just make one comment on the sprinklers. You're totally correct about power going out and again, it depends on where you're at and the situation you're at. Where at Gun Lake, pretty well everybody draws from the lake. There's one fellow that built a new place back around 2010. And he actually put a 2.5-inch line, steel line, into his basement and then straight up. And he's got a big pump at the lake, gas-fired pump. And that sprinkler does 200-300 feet circle right around this whole place. And it's easy to shut down and drain because it's just gravity feed, out it goes. And just one sprinkler does that whole area. It's amazing to look at, but he planned that. It was actually planned to do that. Then again, it's somebody that has to go in and fill up the tank if you're evacuated, which BC Wildfire was doing.
Okay, folks,
So I would make a motion to receive my report.
Yes,
and,
I would that.
I promise
Well,
to
second.
forward your names on to Jerry Lynn Kirk so that you're included in her communications and her, I must say, her minutes on our call were better than mine. There you are. More detail.
so a motion to receive. Seconded. Move to second and call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. Okay, we're gonna break for lunch for 30 minutes.
30 minutes.
How's that sound?
Yep, sounds good.
Okay, there we go. Let's continue this, and we are on 8.3. Furry Creek Community Association Social Events, Director Rainbow.
I move that funding of $3,000 be allocated from Area D select funds to support a series of social events for residents of Furry Creek.
Seconded, moved and seconded, call the question, all in favor, vote, motion carried. Director Rainbow once again.
Thank you. This is when you were doing. No. I'm gonna ask Angela to, the wording in here we've revised. So I'm gonna ask Angela to read it out to you.
Okay.
Thank you through the chair, for consideration of the EAD that up to $4,000 be granted to the Furry Creek Community Association on a reimbursement basis from Electoral Area D Select Funds. Cost Center 2904 towards Fire Smart activities that may be undertaken by the association, conditional upon occurrence of the following: that the FCCA determines that such funds or portion thereof are required to carry out activities that supplement existing Fire Smart Grant Program funding, and the Director of Protective Services approves such activities.
Thank you.
Second.
Now, the wording's different, but the intent is exactly the same. And this was done in consultation with Mark anyway, so it's not a problem for me at all, the new words.
Okay, moved and seconded, call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. 8.5. Director Rainbow once again.
We changed that, so I didn't really mention it. Oh, yeah, that funding of $7,000 be granted to the Britannia Mine Museum Society from Electoral Area D Select Funds, cost under 2904, on behalf of Director Rainbow, towards the purchase of a burn pan for fire training purposes.
Moved, seconded.
I'll move that.
Okay, moved and seconded, call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. Very good.
If I could just comment on that.
Yeah.
That originally, the request was much smaller than that for what we were going to do, a homemade static burn pan thing. And then we got talking and looking at things, and he checked it out on the internet and came back and said, look, we've got this one that's on wheels. And if we have it, we'd be happy to share it with other people, which I thought was quite interesting. So other people would be anybody within the region if there's any interest. What it is specifically to train employees to use fire extinguishers, which maybe doesn't sound like too
No,
much,
it's
but
very good.
in the mining museum, they have 40 odd employees, and there's quite a lot of turnover, and they've got fire extinguishers all over the place. So they want to, part of the initiation, part of the whatever you call it, when you get a new employee, is to teach them how to use the fire extinguishers. So we thought it'd be useful in Britannia, you know, in the community, in the commercial area, and it might be useful to other people elsewhere. We would want a little fee to support that, you know, which would go to the mining museum, but
Nice.
and it's on wheels, so I think we can just tow it behind a car, but we'll see.
Okay.
There you go.
Very good.
Thank you.
8.6, Sea to Sky Trail, Paradise Valley Toilet Facility, Director Rainbow.
We've changed the wording on this as well, haven't we? Oh, is this what the way?
But it is a recommendation to the board. This is code funding. Oh, sorry.
No, 8.6.
8.6. That can be recommended to the board.
Yeah, my heading for this originally was toilets in paradise, but apparently we didn't like that. Anyway, so two that's one, that it be recommended to the board, and that staff investigate the potential for the installation of 2 urine diversion toilets at the north end of Paradise Valley Road on Crown land, with considerations including but not limited to consultation with Squamish Nation, timelines, supply and installation, signage, ongoing operation and maintenance costs, together with associated staff time. It's complicated one, this, as you can see, but
Question? Just wondering on permits to be able to do that on county.
that's all. We didn't use the word permit, but that's all sort of included in that.
Yeah.
Would you like a seconder?
That'd be good, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You're not putting any cost, you're just asking for this to be done by staff.
Right now, no, not putting any cost to it. We want to find out if it's possible. If we can't get the approvals and the permits and all that kind of stuff, then I would expect that the cost would be around $30,000. And I think Just need to confirm this with Suzanne. I think it can come out of that community works fund, but if it can't, then it could come out of amenities, area D amenities, which also has to be referred to the board. So,
See, if you go back in this agenda, there's the one that's going into Gates Lake Park.
Yeah.
So saved you, that was 30, about 30,000 in January. So, yeah.
Is that something that's a solution in area A?
Well, it's interesting because after the meeting last, the board meeting, I've researched and the Vancouver Coastal Health and Northern Health, so two of the four health authorities have it in there that structures that don't have water supply can have pit toilets,
But not interior health.
but not interior
That's all we
health
care about.
or I think it's.
these are not pit toilets.
I know,
Yeah.
I sidetracked,
So
sorry.
the pit toilets can also have a vault. Right? And I presume that's what you're doing. You got no water. It's just a pit toilet that's gonna get pumped out.
Yep.
That's all they are. So, yeah, it's interesting. That's why I talk about a permit. Cause then they also talk about vaults. And you have to have a permit to have a vault. And that means that with that permit, it allows you to, cause they'll have a maintenance agreement with it where you're gonna be pumping it out on a regular basis. So it's just interesting that two of the four health authorities have that. And
What's a vault? What is that?
it's space underneath that collects it. Whether it's
So it's
It's just a tank.
A tank.
So,
Yeah.
so,
Instead of a pit, you've actually got a.
well, you dig a hole, you
Contained.
put a cement,
yeah,
fiberglass, whatever, tank in there, and then the top part, put a gasket on it, put the top part on, and you have your floor and everything, and that's it.
Yeah.
And so it's a sealed vault is what it is,
Pretty
right?
expensive.
Well, that's why so the first one we put in at Gates Lake Park was $16,000, I believe, something like that. Now it's 30. So it's doubled in price since we put the first one
We
in.
could do 2 toilets for 30,000.
Pardon me?
We could do 2 toilets for 30,000 with these
Yeah,
other.
well, the thing is too, if you check with forestry, all the forestry campsites
Mhm.
have pit toilets. And they're not near as comprehensive as the one we're putting in at Gates Lake Park. Because Tourism Pemberton got a grant from Destination BC for $250,000, I believe. And have put in these pit toilets throughout the corridor at trailheads. We've got one at Cool Creek Trail up the valley, and there's one at Semaphore Lakes.
Yep.
All this stuff, and those ones that are approved by forestry, they were only, like I'm thinking, oh God, I'll throw a number out, $2,500. They weren't thousands of dollars, right? And they met the requirements of the day. So like for your place up there, for all those folks up there, they could use, in my mind, they could use those units because they meet the requirements, right?
yeah,
And they're not, like I say, thousands and thousands of dollars. Anyways,
yeah. Anyway,
yeah,
on Crown land, there's no answers, but you'd have to get a permit from the health authority.
yeah. So that's Vancouver Coastal Health where you are? Or interior?
You guys are coastal health,
Yeah, and you are,
interior health.
yeah, interior. Okay, so Tony's gonna move this, obviously.
And I seconded it.
Okay. Moved and seconded, call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried.
Good.
Correspondence for action. Request for funding Permanent Meadows Fire Association operating costs. Permanent Meadows Fire Association requests funding of $10,000 to cover operating costs, including storage of vehicles and annual insurance renewal. And I will move that.
Second.
Yeah, and so so the storage, they rent space from one of the two of the farmers actually, for space in their barns, root houses, whatever to do. That's their fire hall until they get a fire hall. So anyways, go ahead.
Through the chair, just clarification, is that area C select funds? You will
Yes.
be allocating? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, and that, so moved and seconded, call the question. All in favor, opposed, motion carried. Second is request for funding Rotary Club of Pemberton and Lions Club of Pemberton 22nd Annual Permanent Barn Dance. So the Pemberton Lions Club, Rotary Club of Pemberton requests funding in the form of sponsorship for the 22nd Annual Pemberton Barn Dance on September the 21st, 24th. Sponsorship options, platinum, 3,500, gold, 17, and 500. So I'm gonna go with the $3,500 sponsorship. And there's 10 tickets that come with that sponsorship. So I'll leave that up to the CAO to put everybody's name in a hat and dispense them accordingly.
Thank you.
Okay? Thank you.
And clarification that it is again, area
Yeah,
C
so, yeah.
select.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I'll second that.
Okay. So moved and seconded, call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. Thank you. Decision on late business, we don't have any.
I'll move with John.
Late business,
Oh, sorry.
director's notice of motion, none,
No, I'll move with John.
very good. Seconded by Vivian.
Do you have to
Uh,
second it?
No, I don't, you do?
Yeah.
Okay, well, there we go. So it's official. Call the question, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. We are adjourned.